Hello and welcome to this video on constructors in Java. In this video, we'll be seeing about what are constructors, what are the different types of constructors, and a coding example for each types to understand them better. So let us dive into the topic. So a constructor initializes an object when it is created. It has the same name as its class and is syntactically similar to a method. However, constructors have no explicit return type. Each time an object is created using a new keyword, at least one constructor, which is also called as the default constructor, is invoked to assign initial values to the data members of the same class. So first let us initialize a class. I'll initialize a class called myClass, and it will have a variable int num. And to initialize a constructor, you need to give initial values to the variables defined in the class. So let us first initialize our constructor. As I said before, our constructor should have the same name as our class, my class, and it should have round brackets to initialize their constructors and our open close brackets. Now, whatever I give inside this particular class, whenever it is initiated in my main function, these would be updated. So now I would like to initiate a default value for num as 0. I will be able to do this using constructors. All classes have constructors whether you define it or not, because Java automatically provides a default constructor that initializes all members of the variable to 0. However, once you define your own constructor, the default constructor is no longer used. So since I have assigned a constructor here, these values whatever I give would be stored. If not, by default the values of num is also 0. There are two types of constructors: no argument constructor and parameterized constructor. First, let us look at no argument constructor. So there are two types of constructors: no argument constructor and parameterized constructor. As the name specifies, the no argument constructor of Java does not accept any parameterize. Instead, using these constructors, the instance variable of a method will be initialized with fixed values for all objects. A constructor has no parameters is known as no argument or zero argument constructor. If you don't define a constructor in a class, then the compiler creates a constructor with no arguments for the class. And if we write a constructor with arguments or no arguments, then the compiler does not create a default constructor. A note here is that the default constructor provides default values to the object like 0, null, etc. as I said before. So the class here is defaultly no argument because whatever we give inside this round brackets is considered parameters, and we have not initialized any of these parameters. Now to check if they are running, I would like to create a my class in my main function. So I'll provide as t1 equal to, as I said before, to initialize any class you have to provide the new keyword. So to know that our constructor is called, I'll try to print the value of num. I'll assign the value of num to 10. So because default it is going to be 0. And now try to print it out. t1.num. Java. As you can see, the value of now is now updated to 10 without me working on anything in the main function. This mainly happens because of the new operator and our constructor. And let me now try to create another class called t2 and again call my function and check if the values assigned for that also. Now if I try to run this program, we'll get 210 as our answers because each t1 and t2's num has the value 10 by default because of our no parameter constructors. Yeah, so this is about no parameter constructors. Now parameterized constructors, most often you will need a constructor that accepts one or more parameters. Parameters are added to a constructor in the same way that they are added to a method. Just declare them inside the parenthesis after the constructor's name. So let us understand them better. So these my class now can handle constructors, meaning whatever values that I pass through my class can now be associated with the values. So let us understand what that means. Now, instead of getting the value 10 from the coder, I want some value from my main function. So how do I do that? I initialize my value 10 in my round brackets, and for this 10 to receive in my constructor, I'll initialize a variable num. Again, it is going to be the same name as num. It can also be different, but let us understand how to differentiate between the num that is being sent through here as parameter and the classes num. We can do that by providing an operator called this.num. So what happens when I provide this.num, the classes num is taken into consideration, and our normal now is nothing but the parameters num. So now what happens, the value that I give inside these parameters would be received from constructor, and the num value 10 would now be associated with the num value inside this class. As you can see, an error is thrown in here because when you are defining a parameterized constructor, it is compulsory for the program to send some value inside these parameters. So when I give 20, these values are sent. Now let me check if it is printing. As you can see, the values 10 and 20 are printed, and these values are now taken from our main function and received through our constructors, and the values are stored in our class. So parameterized constructors can handle more than one parameters. So what do I mean? I can provide multiple values, and I can initialize another number like num2 and num1. So now we have two variables, num1 and num2, and I have to send two values inside them. So int num2 num1 is equal to num1. So if you remember properly, I'll be using my this operator to associate the value with 2 and associate them with num2. So these two values are now fixed. Now I have to rename these values as num1, num1, and now I'll just send the values 20 and 30 to them. And I'll try to print these values also. T1 dot num2 and also T2 dot num2. Now what I've done here is that I've sent two values through my class initialization to our constructor of my class. So there are two parameters that needs to be sent. So I'm sending 10, 20 and 20, 30, and I'm trying to print the values and check if it is working properly. As you can see, the values 10, 20 and 20, 30 are now printed. So this means our constructor works. A note here is that if you are not providing any constructors value, default constructors are invoked. These are nothing but just whatever is being initialized. Since nothing is initialized, these constructors exist automatically. And a note here is that there is no return value statement in the constructor, but the constructor returns the current class instance. We can write return inside a constructor, but they do not make any sense logically. This is about constructors. Hope this video was helpful. Thank you.